Please welcome Nick Jeffries, Insights and Analysis at Ellen Macarthur Foundation.
And thank you for the BlueTech team for organising this wonderful event. Today I want to echo Paul's words from yesterday, a hopeful and optimistic story about some of the opportunities that exist in better ways of growing food. A relevant topic, I think. We are in the nation's spiritual home for plant growing. And of course, as I'm sure many of you already know, farming uses more fresh water than any other sector. Supporting effective farming is therefore supporting effective water management. But growing food in a better way has a raft of other systemic benefits. In 2017, Project Drawdown identified the 100 most powerful interventions to reverse global heating. Within the top 20, 5 related to energy production, yet 8 related to food production and 4 to land management. So the clear message is, having better ways, changing the way we produce food, changing the way we manage land, could be one of the most powerful things to address climate change. Before I go into a more detail about some of the approaches that I've come across, a little context. For the last a couple of years, the Ellen Macarthur Foundation has been applying circular economy thinking, circular economy, which is based on 3 principles: designing out waste and pollution, keeping resources in use, and regenerating natural systems. We've been applying the circular economy thinking to the global food system. With the risk of giving you indigestion, I won't go into too many details, but I think, but I'll just give you the basic story. By 2050, there will be 2.5 billion more mouths to feed in the world. This is set against a background of shifting climate, shifting socio-economic trends. So our year-long analysis confirmed significant negative societal costs associated with the food system. Half of them, I think, better known, we call them consumption impacts, obesity, malnutrition, type 2 diabetes, those kind of things. But perhaps more surprising, the same number of societal costs, equal in value, we calculate about sort of 6-7 trillion, are associated with the way we produce food. So things like human health impacts associated with pesticide, water and air pollution, and the diminishing potency of our antibiotics. But how to act? We decided to focus on cities. By 2050, 80% of food will pass through cities. But also, currently, only 2% of the resources that get discarded by cities are looped back into productive use. So for these reasons, we believe that city food actors could be very influential in driving change. And so over the course of last year, we worked very closely with a big group, like over 100 companies from the urban food value chain, including with Suez. So thank you for that. They're one of our lead partners on this project. And we came up with these 3 ambitions which these urban food actors could embrace to create momentum to a healthier and more regenerative food system. I'm not going to go into too much details about this. You can get this report from our publications page on our website. But what I want to focus on for the rest of the talk is this ambition of sourcing food regeneratively. Because I believe it is within this ambition that there are great opportunities for the BlueTech community. So, regenerative agriculture. How best to describe this? Well, my favorite current way is this. If you consider 1 acre of healthy soil, there is equivalent in weight to 12 yearling cows. It's about 6 tons. But an unhealthy acre, you get about maybe half a ton, 1 yearling cow. To put it another way, that healthy farm is 12 times more productive in the engine room, and because of the benefits to soil structure, it can store up to 1 million litres of water. For soil-based growing, key to unlocking this potential is building up organic content. And of course, there's plenty of this pouring out of our cities. This feeds the microbes, it activates the soil biology, and then we can allow nature with its 3.8 billion years of R&D to do the hard work for you. Soil's so important. Paul mentioned earlier Leonardo da Vinci's fascination with water. He was also very fascinated with soils. I think his quote was something like, "We know more about the celestial bodies in the heavens above than we do know about the soil beneath our feet." There are many great examples of large-scale transformation from conventional to regenerative in broadacre farms. This is the late Doug Tompkins farm in northern Argentina. When he took it over, the yields were crashing. It was addicted to chemicals. It was all over, had these soil erosion scars. And so through a very diligent process of recontouring the land, creating these beneficial flow paths, feeding the soil biology, driving agrodiversity, within a short 5 to 7 years, he made it very, very productive and beautiful with many biodiversity benefits. He was very into biodiversity, Doug Tompkins. What's going on at the other end of the scale, I think, is in many ways more interesting and important. Early on in our analysis, we came across this fact from the ETC group that smallholder farmers, they actually feed 70% of the world, but only use 30% of agricultural resources. They're a very important group which, on the whole, farms effectively. However, they're also a very vulnerable group. Because of their location, they're the coalface of climate change. But they also, because of their economic precariousness, they're often only 2 or 3 harvests away from disaster. Ironically, as a group of food producers, they also make up the majority of the 850 million people who are hungry in the world. So as a response to this, in India, there was this movement called the Zero Budget Natural Farming movement was developed. This came out of southern India, and its main intention was to embed an approach that decouples smallholder farmers from the risk of crippling debt due to sort of borrowing ahead of the planting season for expensive agricultural inputs, as well as address food security. The central pillar of ZBNF is the creation of this, it's kind of like a biostimulant, and it's created out of, it's fermented out of cow dung, cow urine, agricultural byproducts. I view it almost like as a kombucha for the soil. And that goes in, you can coat seeds with it, and the other pillars are around mulching, water conservation, and more precise applications of water. So this movement has transformed the lives of high-risk farmers all around India. It's reduced their borrowing, it's increased yields and the nutritional content of crops, and it's created more healthier, more profitable, more resilient farm systems. So I think the opportunities here are manifold. Natural systems such as ZBNF, and there are others around the world, have done very well at getting farmers out of this sort of high-risk zone. But the next step up Maslow, up the hierarchy of needs, is just to make their life a little easier. I once put an accelerometer on a treadle pump in a farm in Ethiopia. This is not a treadle pump, this is a rope and washer pump, but the treadle pump. And I measured the average manual pumping. The treadle pump goes like this, everyone's done that. The steps in the gym. Over 2 weeks, the average daily pumping. It was 4 hours. 4 hours of the step machine every day just to cultivate a 750 square meter plot. An incredible effort. I mean, on the plus side, he was the star player in the local football team, so there's a little bit of an upside, but my point is there are 500 million, 500 million potential customers for innovative small-scale systems to alleviate hardship, such as this example, Future Pump. They come up with a low-cost solar irrigation pump. And there are many other examples. Not only the technology, but also smart circular business models to allow this technology to be accessible to people who can't afford an outright purchase. And of course, that also has the benefit of creating more utilization for that technology. And then, so having dealt with, getting them out of the high-risk zone, alleviating the hardship, the next thing is to increase profits. In this kind of context, most of the food losses occur post-harvest, pre-consumer, and the reason, storage, distribution. So better coal supply chains, preferably renewable energy powered, could really contribute to this. So smallholder farmers, they are a very important group. We want them to thrive. They provide local food and the diversity of scales needed for a resilient food system. Reducing drudgery and increasing profits will help this happen. I want to talk about farmland restoration and sort of land restoration more broadly. Reversing land degradation is one of the great challenges of our time. And of course, very closely linked with two of our mega crises, global heating and the massive, massive crash in wildlife populations that we're seeing around the world. In the next 30 years, we need to expand our cultivated area by about 2 times the size of India, based on current growing approaches. But at the same time, an area greater than the size of England is being put out of production because of degradation. One of the major contributors to that is the way we actually is the agricultural approaches. So this situation necessitates the worst, the most damaging thing we could ever possibly do in terms of lowering carbon emissions, expanding into our virgin natural lands, our savannas, our forests and jungles. But there are many examples of farmers that have actually rejuvenated land and breathed life back into land that was given up as unproductive, or maybe wasn't even considered productive. Most of these approaches are labor intensive, so innovation that can help industrialize the process of land restoration has huge potential social and economic value in the future. Yakuba Sawadogo from the Sahel region of Burkina Faso, known as the man who stopped the desert. In the 70s, Yakuba began experimenting with 2 types of farmer-managed regeneration methods. They're sort of traditional technologies. There's a zai hole, which is a sort of compost-filled pit, and these cordons pierreux, these sort of belts of stones. They both have the same principles, that maximize the use of limited water resources, but also create areas where nutrients are collected. In these areas, in these fertile hotspots, plants and trees are planted, and they create this positive feedback loop where evapotranspiration and foliage falling onto the ground creates a condition for more and more growth. Sawadogo's forest is now one of the most fertile and biodiverse in the whole region, providing climate-resilient food security by providing multiple crops, even in times of drought. What does another land restoration product look like? Well, this is a nice crossover to Michael's world. The winner of a major biomimicry prize last year was a company called Nucleario, and they've created these individual 100% biodegradable tree nursery units inspired by the bromeliad plant. That is a bromeliad, I hope. And what these do is they harvest dew, collect beneficial microbes, and also provide a barrier to unwanted biology, in this case, leafcutter ants. But perhaps one of the most startling examples of ecosystem restoration that I came across was the farm that Carl Hodges set up in Eritrea in the late 90s, in the sort of coastal, arid region of Eritrea. That's not it, by the way. Carl Hodges was an atmospheric scientist, and he worked on the famous Biosphere 2 project in the Arizona desert. But when he retired, he decided to explore new ways to pursue his favorite hobby, which was creating abundance in inhospitable places. So Carl's integrated seawater system turns abundant resources, sunlight, seawater, desert, into an array of different benefits. Lifting water from the Arabian Sea, it passes through a number of aquaculture and plant growing stages, each stage nourished by a flow of beneficial nutrients. This multi-species system creates many revenue streams, hundreds of jobs, supports social revitalization, provides a sanctuary for migratory birds, sequesters carbon, and just generally produces the conditions conducive for life and further economic activity. It's a very inspirational man, very inspirational project. He's now trying to replicate this model in the Sonora Desert. So these are just some of the opportunities that exist in just 2 areas of regenerative farming. Of course, the type of farming you do is determined by the conditions. There are many, many more: rotational livestock, agroecology, agroforestry, and within each of those different approaches, there are other opportunities. But I'd like just to finish with a story just to illustrate that it's not just technology and technique that's going to drive this revolution. There is also an important role for finance. The city of Nairobi relies on the Upper Tana River, this is a picture of the river basin, for 90% of its water. Hydro schemes and dams along the river also provide a lot of the electricity for the city. However, in the last few decades, because of population expansion in the upper catchments, there's a lot more silt going into the river. There's huge amounts of silt, and this is the cause of unreliable power and water supplies in the city, but also very expensive desilting operations and downstream plant. So with this in mind, a NGO called the Nature Conservancy, it's a US-based NGO, they set up the Upper Tana Water Fund. The idea of the fund is that downstream users, city utilities and other downstream users, they pay into this fund, and then the money is used to educate and support, at the last count, about 25 farmers in the upper catchments in more conservation agriculture techniques. As a result of that, the farmer yields are going up as the soil fertility goes up, but also they have extra revenue streams through the crops that they use to stabilize the slopes, things like elephant grass, which they can use as cattle fodder. And of course, the downstream users, what they pay into the fund is much less than the money that they save for reduced silting. So I think this is a very good example. This fund, and there are others that exist to protect the city of Quito and Rio, is a great example of a financial mechanism to fund system thinking approaches to conservation, in which everyone benefits. And I believe the same rationale can be applied to regenerative agriculture. Not every farmer is as rich as the Tompkins family, and the margins in farming are often quite low, and farmers can be, are quite risk-averse group. So financial bridging mechanisms that allow them, give them the confidence to make the leap, while at the same time growing great food, but at the same time enhancing biodiversity, protecting ecosystem services, and sequestering carbon, I think would be very, very important in driving, as I was saying, driving this whole revolution. So hopefully I've demonstrated that farming does not have to be a zero-sum game. It is possible to produce food in a way that also provides this full array of systemic benefits, including biodiversity enhancement and also the very important topic of sequestering carbon. So I'd just like to, and as Matt Damon said yesterday, how lucky you guys that you are around to make things better. So this is my call to action to the BlueTech community. Grasp the opportunities to drive a more healthy and more regenerative food system. Thank you very much.